The USA currently has $31.5 trillion in public debt held by the federal government alone. This doesn't even include the roughly $3.2 trillion in state debt, the $17.1 trillion in household debt, or the $24 trillion in corporate debt. That's just the USA, the world's largest and most indebted nation, which accounts for only a small portion of total global debt. Now over 300 trillion US dollars. This includes everything from trillions in US government securities to the $500 owing on someone's credit card. It's all borrowed money used for various economic activities, from funding national infrastructure to buying a PlayStation 5. Averaged out, global debt is almost 3 times global GDP, and the average person alive today owes nearly $40,000. This is concerning, given the average person only produces a per capita output of just over $10,000. Economists and commentators have varying opinions on this situation, ranging from nothing to worry about to this will end the global economy as we know it. The reality lies somewhere in between. Most sensible economists worry about debt levels, but as long as a few key things don't go wrong, the debt should be sustainable, though not without causing other problems. On an individual level, understanding the functions of debt and how it behaves differently on individual, national, and global levels is crucial. So who do we owe all this money to? Can a debt load 3 times global GDP ever be sustainable? Is there a responsible way to reduce it? And finally, what could go wrong if we can't? What is global debt? Debt on a global scale behaves differently from individual debt, where someone borrows money and repays it over time. On a global level, there's no external entity loaning money to the world. Economists often joke about this, saying, "We haven't figured out how to get Martians to approve our loan applications yet." This strange nature of global debt makes it hard to fully understand. Stick with us, though. You'll walk away knowing more about global debt than most headline writers. Debt is simple to understand when it's between 2 entities. One loans the money and the other owes it. Globally, however, the economy owes itself. Every liability for a government, company, bank, or individual is an asset for another. When the global economy borrows money, it's essentially borrowing from its future self. If we simplify global debt as one single loan with a balance of 300 trillion US dollars, increasing this balance requires spending more than is repaid. Globally, every dollar of debt is matched by a dollar of assets. Taking on debt can be beneficial if it's invested in projects that generate long-term value for the economy. Economists measure debt relative to GDP, debt to GDP ratio, which can sound scarier than it is. Global debt is now 3 times global GDP, but while debt accumulates, GDP is measured yearly. If an individual's debt were 3 times their income, it wouldn't necessarily be a problem, assuming it was for value-adding investments like student loans or mortgages. A better measure might compare global debt to global assets, or global net worth. In 2021, total global assets, houses, cars, stocks, cryptocurrencies, bonds, loans, etc., were collectively worth 1 quadrillion US dollars. Subtracting the $300 trillion of global debt leaves the planet's net worth at around 700 trillion US dollars. What is GDP? GDP measures an economy's total output. It's calculated based on spending, which reflects market production. GDP equals total market demand, broken into consumption, investment, government spending, and net exports. On a global scale, net exports are 0 since Earth doesn't trade with Martians yet. Governments, businesses, and households account for all global debt. Financial corporations are sometimes categorized separately since they use debt to create more debt. When governments increase debt, it's usually to fund welfare or infrastructure without raising taxes. Households use debt for consumption or housing investments, while businesses borrow for machinery, expansion, or share buybacks. Debt boosts GDP initially by increasing purchasing power, but requires repayment, leading to lower spending. Globally, this cycle is smoothed out due to the sheer scale of activity, but remains an essential driver of economic booms and busts. Governments can manage this by employing counter-cyclical fiscal policy, taxing more and spending less during booms, and vice versa during downturns. However, political unpopularity often prevents governments from saving during good times. Government debt. Government debt isn't inherently bad if it expands a country's productive capacity. Infrastructure and education investments, for example, create long-term economic value. Projects like rail lines or roads may not generate direct profits, but boost productivity, enabling businesses and individuals to pay more taxes. This funds future projects and sustains economic growth. Spending on defense and social programs also has economic benefits. For example, secure trade routes, lower crime, and better opportunities increase output and tax revenue. However, misdirected spending or funding projects with no long-term economic returns can lead to problems. Pandemic-related stimulus measures prioritize short-term stability over long-term growth, which was necessary at the time. Global net worth. Global net worth as a share of GDP has risen 50% in the last 50 years and 25% in the last 20 years, while GDP has grown tenfold since 1970. However, investments today yield less output than decades ago, especially in advanced economies. Much of the world's wealth appreciation has come from non-productive assets like real estate. Globally, real estate is worth about $350 trillion, with $250 trillion from land alone. Investments in land don't boost output, they just increase prices, reducing affordability and diverting resources from productive sectors. Debt speculation in unproductive assets hinders economic growth, especially in developing countries struggling with debt. In contrast, investing in technologies that enhance productivity supports long-term economic expansion. Who owns global debt? Households own 95% of global wealth, including the $300 trillion of debt, while governments control the remaining 5%. Governments' wealth includes currency reserves, real estate, state-owned enterprises, and sovereign wealth funds. Some, like the U.S. federal government, have negative wealth. China holds the largest share of global government wealth through reserves and land. Global debt itself isn't a problem, but how it's used is crucial. While we technically owe this debt to ourselves, disparities in wealth distribution complicate the picture. The average global net worth is $90,000, but this figure is skewed by extreme wealth concentrations, a topic we'll explore in a future discussion. Let me know what you think in the comments section below. As always, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more updates. Until next time.